is that he's been deeply engaged with Mr. Christian Catterall in deploying Citrix's solutions at Azure Bostov. So they are both deeply, intimately familiar with the deployment of a Citrix cloud delivered security solution at this account. And what we are going to talk about today is essentially what happened at this account. We are going to talk about what drove Azure Bostov AG Group to kind of explore cloud delivered security, what drove them to begin to evolve their cloud delivered security into evolve their security architectures into a new model. Was it hybrid work? Was it COVID-19? Was it a combination? And then where are they going from here? So they've evolved into cloud security. Are they evolving their networking now? Are they going towards a SASE architecture? Where are they going? So it's going to be a candid conversation, and I'm gonna hand it off to these guys now, to Christian Catterall and Christian Schwennemann. First, Christian Catterall, if you don't mind, could you just give us a really quick overview about Azure Bostov Group? Just a couple of lines as to what do they do, and what does your environment look like?
Sure. Azure Bostov AG is located in Austria, Europe. We are producing gravel, cement, and concrete in 6 countries. We have around 500 IT workplaces, and we do IT services for all of these workplaces. Well, I think that's the most important to know for now.
Yes, and that helps. So now when you've got so many different workspaces and you're spread across different countries, there are challenges that you have to deal with along those lines, and we'll get into that. From what I understand, Christian Catterall, and I'm gonna, because both of your first names are Christian, I'm gonna refer to you as Christian Catterall and Christian Schwennemann. So Christian Catterall, if you don't mind, can you tell us, I think you've been a Citrix customer for a little bit now. Can you tell us about what Citrix solutions have you been using? Just a brief introduction about your background with Citrix.
We've been using Citrix virtual apps and desktops for quite a long time already. It was a presentation server 4.5, I think. That was when I started using Citrix. But in the company, we had Citrix for longer already. Recently, we started to introduce Citrix Sia, the Secure Internet Access, and we bought Sd-Wan.
Awesome. So that helps. So I think, so you mentioned that you've been using Citrix's virtualization technologies for a little bit, and then you explored Citrix's cloud delivered security solution, right? So what was it that got you to explore security? Now you already had the virtual applications and desktops. You already had the virtualization. What was it that got you to think, hey, probably my security needs to change. There's probably something that needs to be done, or was it you were just going along? You were just exploring new ideas in your roadmap. Can you give us some background as to what was going on?
Of course, as you mentioned already. We were using Citrix virtual apps and desktops already for quite a long time, and our users are used or have been used to work from home, but it was not that important like it is now. COVID-19 changed a lot for us. We had to move a lot of people into their home office, and we found out, or it was clear, that we don't have much control about their internet access or their networks at home. Yeah. So protecting the devices which are outside of our company network got even more important.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. So these workers that were once upon a time optionally working from home or optionally working remote were suddenly 100% working remote, and suddenly it was okay. This is now critical. This is now important. And so then when these workers went at home, because when I've spoken to a whole lot of other accounts and analysts, the thing is, okay, when the employee goes home, they start going on to their favorite forums. They go on to ESPN.com or YouTube.com, And that's when the movement, the change in traffic patterns happen, and that's when threats evolve. I'm guessing that's something that was a little bit of a motivation. Is that right?
Yes, of course, you're right.
And then so Christian Schwendemann, so you were with Mr. Christian Cattrall in exploring the evolution to cybersecurity. Could you explain a little bit about how you went from the existing environment that Christian Cattrall had, and then how you went to a cloud delivered security model? Could you explain just some fundamentals of a cloud delivered security model and how this all came about?
So maybe also to give some background on how we all started together. I used to be consultant before I joined Citrix, and so Christian and myself have a quite long history already, and I used to give him also ideas how to be efficient with the existing solutions that he already had, and also how other Citrix solutions could help him to move forward and also to advance the way he's managing the resources. So this was in the past also one of the reasons why we then moved forward to Citrix as a cloud offering when we look at virtual apps and desktops. And at the same time, we had a look on how is the future going to be and what other things are in Citrix cloud solutions that could help. So for example, content collaboration, former ShareFile, is something that is being in use already. And we also investigated in all these different countries, how can you easily connect to the resources? So is VPN or is connection to Austria to then connect to the local hosted resources really the right solution? So this was in the first also the reason why we did trade up to Workspace Premium Plus in the first step. And this consulting, this exchange was on a regular basis. So one day we had this session again where we talked about what's going on, what's new, and Christian introduced me to their plans to renew their existing, let's say, security concept. So how can antivirus of the future look like? So what's state of the art? How do other customers manage antivirus on their virtual apps desktop solution was the one question, but the other was also, he was in the finding phase of what firewall, what next-gen firewall could be something in here. And that was the point where I introduced that Citrix has cloud-delivered security solutions like Sia, Secure Internet Access, that address these needs he was looking for to be aware of how is the network today leveraged. So what traffic is going through the network connections, but also to gain insights on how is the connection itself, the application being used. Because traditional proxies, traditional firewalls will tell you that you are connecting to a resource, let's say Office 365, but they won't tell you, is it the private or is it the corporate tenant? And to gain back the control, who is allowed, when they are allowed, and how are they allowed to interact with the specific application. This is the benefit Citrix can give you here. And the discussion first started with, let's have a look for the virtual apps and desktops users. But quickly we found out there are way more devices in the network. You need to be aware. There are devices that reside in a guest network. So the guests that come to your company, and you also need some compliance in this network. And there are other devices that are connected to your network. When we think of network printers, which also can scan to whatever location where you might also want to have the control. So this was then also where we started to investigate what else does live in your network where we want to gain back the control.
There's a lot of information that you just gave in there, so I had to take out my notepad and I had to start jotting things down. that was very powerful, and I really appreciate that. So a couple of things that you mentioned was that, okay, so there was a hybrid work, so there were workers moving remote. At the same time, or slightly prior to that, there was a cloud migration that occurred as well, and cloud migration for the benefits of cloud migration, and we know those benefits. So when that cloud migration occurred, there was also okay, there's personal tenants of Office 365. There's personal tenants of Google applications that are getting used. And hey, do you realize that those are being used? Do you realize that a line of business might have a shadow IT application? Are you able to identify and control that shadow IT application? You also mentioned network scanners, I think, right? So, or like essentially IoT devices essentially in the network. So are you able to identify and protect those IoT devices? Is that those were some of the conversations?
I think
yeah.
In the beginning, it was not the talking point. It was during the process of talking about the solution and solution finding something we investigated. What else do we need to think of? And it's always when you start to think of security, you cannot just focus on one specific field, because it's like if you block, let's say, the access to web resources completely, then the users are likely to find a way around, like take out their phone out of the pocket, and this will add more distraction to them because they even lose more the focus to the work they should do. So this was then something Christian mentioned also in the process he already went through.
That's awesome.
May I jump in?
Yes, please.
One interesting finding, for example, was that we discovered people using internet streaming services, streaming radio. And because you will never find the quarry in the center of the town, bandwidth matters in those locations, and it was important, and it was good to find out those things, because now we can prevent that the line is filled up with things which are not important for doing their job. And
that's awesome. So you were able to identify those applications that were hogging your bandwidth as compared to applications that should have been online. So recreational applications versus productivity applications, essentially. And that's awesome. And hey, so cloud delivered security, for the folks in the audience that are still getting into this conversation. So guys, cloud delivered security is essentially, instead of putting some hardware appliances in your on-premise data center with cloud delivered security, what Christian Schwendemann and Christian Catterall have essentially done is they've put a cloud overlay on top of every single endpoint, every single internet facing endpoint in their organization. So all traffic, unless they want to bypass something, all traffic that from their internet facing endpoints goes through that security overlay without having to be backhauled. And then all that traffic is inspected, it can be managed and all that stuff. And because this is a cloud delivered security solution, it's auto scalable, updates are automatic, it's unified management, things like that. So Christian Catterall, when all of you began to deploy Citrix Secure Internet Access, which is a cloud delivered security solution, was there something that really struck you that, hey, this is really awesome? And I realized that you mentioned a few things that were useful for you, but if I asked you and I said that, okay, what's the one thing or the two things that were most important to you, that were the most valuable to you? Are there some things that you'd like to share? And the reason I'm asking this question is because there's probably your peers and people like you in similar situations that are probably looking for a solution. And if you mention what was important to you, it might be useful for them as well. That's the reason. So what?
Yes.
Yeah.
Our IT department is very small. And so we don't have much time to play around and try things, and we cannot invest a lot of time to install everything and test it out completely. And one of the most important things is that it's so easy to deploy, it's so easy to test and to do a proof of concept, because the cloud service is up and running already, and all you need is to install this agent and you can start testing. That's it. I think this is the really most important thing.
Okay, so the simplicity of the testing, of the install and the implementation is, I think, what you mentioned, right?
Yes. Furthermore, we were using a cloud service, Citrix Cloud Services already, and it's integrated in the cloud dashboard. So there is not a new vendor. It's not a new interface. It's integrated and streamlined. It's a central management console we're using, and you don't need to learn a lot, of course, because the topic is different if you compare to virtual apps and desktops. But you know how to log in, and there is not another login for no new credentials.
Yeah.
Just install the agent, be happy and use it.
Exactly, and I tend to hear this from other enterprises as well, from other IT teams as well, and some of them describe it as like, let's just say you have all Apple devices in your home, or you have all Samsung devices in your home. So it's that the iPhone connects very easily to the AirPods, very easily connect to the Mac, very easily connects to Apple TV. So there is just this uniformity and this unification that happens. Similarly with, say, Samsung or whichever other vendor you prefer. So that holistic experience that everything just works is I think something that Citrix is after. But Christian Schwennemann, if you don't mind, could you explain exactly how? So Christian Catterl mentioned the agent, right? So he mentioned that there is an agent that you have to install. Can you just explain to the audience exactly what is this agent? How is it that there is traffic is going from an endpoint to the cloud, to the security cloud? How is that happening, and what is this agent?
Maybe also at this point to explain, the agent is one of the options which we prefer, because the agent is, let's say, the feel well package. It does do all the magic. Who is the client? It does prepare the connections, and it gives you a lot of flexibility in matters of you can decide by policy what exactly should happen on this device. This agent is also multi-user operating system capable. So this means your virtual apps desktop session host, or if you want to refer your XenApp host, your old, they are fine with providing user-specific sessions and with this insights. If we cannot install, or we do not want to install an agent, we also got other technical options. And this was then something we also, with the existing solutions that were in place during the POC, tested. So I referred in the beginning to the guest network, the Wi-Fi where anyone can connect to. We use the existing firewall appliances to upstream, to send the whole traffic that is within this network based on a tunnel to our solution. And every device that would reside in the network is then part of our solution. So when it comes to monitoring, we also got other technical solutions, like other solutions might have proxy puck based or DNS security. So for whatever use case out there might be, or what device type, we got a solution. And the agent is able to be installed on Windows, Linux, Mac. So we got the solution that fits. And what Christian already said, it was very, very fast. And maybe also to give an idea what fast means, we had the POC in a duration of 2 weeks. So because what do you really want to POC with a cloud-based solution? Does the client work with the agent? Does it allow to connect my existing applications to the services I'm looking for? Are there any sites or services that are being blocked? And that's quite fast. And this was also our investigation for the POC with specific users and devices, while for the pilot phase, where more and more devices and locations and different devices came, it was again, I think, 2 or 3 weeks in which we investigated, are there any use cases or applications we forgot about? And I think this question is then something Christian should answer, but also remediating applications that did not work because it was blocked or had specific requirements. We fixed it really fast. And Christian, I think this is something you can better answer, how often or how fast it was for you to fix any of these applications.
If you know the application, then it's possible to fix that really, really fast within minutes. There are applications or website streaming services which are limited to specific countries. For example, Austrian television is limited to Austrian IP addresses, and our exit node is located in Germany. That's why our users are in the internet using a German IP address. If we would not put those streaming services to the exception list, users would not be able to use those services. Same is for banking websites or electronic banking applications, some financial web pages, for example, but it's really fast to fix.
Awesome. So you had the granular, you mentioned the unified management and the simplicity of management earlier, but at the same time, you had the granular controls to be able to tweak your configuration such that it works for your specific custom environments.
Yes, there is a real-time log. In my opinion, this is really useful for debugging, and then it's really possible to fix things fast.
Yeah, so there's the real-time logs, and then I believe you've got alerts and things of that nature as well that tell you that okay, so there's the real-time logs in terms of the debugging, and then you've got the alerts and analytics in terms of the security issues as well. So if there's a DLP hit or if there's an intrusion hit, then you kind of get that information as well. So that's awesome. And a couple of other cool points that were mentioned was multi-user environment. So if there is a virtualized, and let me know if I'm incorrectly summarizing this, but from my understanding, if there is a virtualized desktop with multiple users accessing that desktop, each user having different profiles, then you have the ability to define the security policies separately for each profile. So that's a fairly deep amount of granularity even for virtualized environments. Am I correct?
Who is this answer for? This question for?
Christian Catterall, Christian Schwenman, both of you. Christian Catterall, why don't you go first?
Okay. Yes, of course. You're completely right. You have a very deep granularity, and well, and that's great.
Yeah.
But just before I found out that we forgot to mention one very important thing, which was one of the facts because for our decision for Sia. I think many people will be skeptic about speed.
Okay.
Because there is another step before you enter the internet, and latency will grow a little. It will increase a little, but it's not notable for the users. And this was really important for us because usability is not really affected.
Right. That's important to know. So essentially, instead of people going directly from the endpoint to the internet, they are going through a security stack. It is a cloud delivered security stack. So it's in line to the internet. And the thing is that the security stack has been designed in such a manner such that the latency is not noticeable by the user. So there's this whole single pass architecture concept that's there. So if there's an SSL packet that's passing through, even though it's being inspected by multiple security engines, it's actually all done at the same time. Versus, okay, it's going through the firewall engine first, then it's going to the malware engine, then it's going to the DLP engine. That's not how it works. It's like you open the packet once, everybody looks at it at the same time, and then it's off its send. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That's the intent, that it's going to be a high performance architecture. So, but thank you for calling that out. You're giving that real user insight in terms of okay, what exactly happens when you deploy it. Thank you for calling that out. Another important point that was mentioned was the fact that it can be supported on lots of different operating systems. So today, an enterprise might be using Windows operating systems, or they might be using Mac operating systems, or a combination of both. But tomorrow, somebody might do an acquisition, and they might acquire a whole bunch of Chrome OS devices, right? So you want that flexibility of operating system. So in terms of the so you've got your virtualized applications and desktops, and you've got your Citrix Sia, which is your cloud delivered security. Are all your users protected? And you don't have to, if you don't want to be specific about it, that's okay. But do you suggest that all employees in an organization should be protected by Citrix Sia or by cloud delivered security, or only a subset? So virtual applications and desktops might be for a subset of users, right? Or it might be for all users. Can you shed a little bit of light where I'm about that, Christian Schwennemann? I think you know where I'm going with that.
Yes. So this is also what I started to talk about earlier, that most of our customers first have in mind, I just want to protect the users that are working remote, that are on my session host, that are on my virtual apps desktop session host. But you need to think out of this frame, because they also got a device sitting in the network that connects there. Even if it's in the internal network, this device can also directly connect to the internet, surf to websites, and you also want to have the insight on what this device does, where the user is surfing to, because that's nothing different than taking out the phone out of the pocket and surf the internet. So he could leave the session host, he could use his local terminal, and then use this to access the internet. This is the reason why we said you should cover all. And also the today already often referred by me, guest network is an important thing here, because if the internal network is being monitored and blocking things, for example, then this could be also something where I could connect my phone to. This is the one thing, but there could also be private devices I use for non-work purpose, like having a device that streams music for me, having a smart plug that I want to control by phone, or having any device that a corporate does not want to be part of their network. So this is the reason for the on-premises network. And then when we think of what other devices do live there, we have the phones, the tablets, etc. And this is where the old architectures of pulling back the traffic, backhauling the traffic through a VPN into my network and then pushing it through an on-premises proxy would add a lot of latency compared to our solution, as you already described, where we access directly the resource from a perspective of user connectivity. And with this, more or less no noticeable latency is added on top. And also when we compare how easy this can be, this is something during the POC and then the real world deployment was what we investigated. So the existing security appliances ASM had different vendors, so 2 vendors. We used them to connect specific networks for specific devices, IoT devices, and it was possible, but it was sometimes hard. So read the documentation, what values do we need to select in these solutions to build up this connection. And with Sd-Wan, it's a solution delivered by Citrix, built by Citrix, built for the whole security stack. So it's super easy compared to configure our own products in our own solutions. And this is then also the benefit from the configuration deployment, but also what Christian already said, one single point of configuration where he sees all the details.
So I think what you're essentially saying is that, yeah, you were able to the CVAD, the Citrix virtualization application and desktop users have to be protected, but in addition to that, you have to protect the IoT devices and the guest users, because a threat can enter from those areas of your network and then laterally travel. Yep. You also mentioned that the traditional approach of VPNs, sort of backhauling guest Wi-Fi traffic into the data center for scrubbing and then sending it, adds latency. So here you're able to provide guests better performance, but at the same time better security. And then you mentioned the unified management and everything. You did also touch on SD-WAN. And Christian Catterl, if you don't mind. So firstly, let me just be honest. I do see you as a visionary. I see you as somebody who's evolving their security architecture, their IT architecture a little faster. You're on top of the trends that are there. So if you don't mind, can you explain to us as to what are you doing with the, as much as you're okay with explaining, what are you doing with the networking side of the business? Are you exploring SD-WAN, and where is it going? And just some background over there.
Well, right now we are exploring a little, and in the end we plan to connect our main locations with SD-WAN to use all the positive effects of this technology for us. This should ensure streamlined and easy deployment. It should ensure better cost effectivity if it comes to internet lines. We don't need to buy expensive MPLS lines, for example. And it completely integrates with the rest of our Citrix infrastructure.
And that's pretty awesome. So I think so the way I'm seeing it now, you started off with Citrix virtualization applications and desktops. You deployed the cloud delivered security. For that, I'm protecting every user everywhere, no matter what threat hits them. And then now you're also evolving the underlying plumbing, the underlying network with SD-Wan. And hey, every one of these things is Citrix products, which means that you've got one Citrix cloud portal that you log into, and then you figure out, okay, if you have to manage security, you go here. If you want to manage SD-WAN, you go here. And then there's like it's just unified management. It's something that works together. I think that's pretty cool. So I think earlier you mentioned the converged vendor approach. So from a logistical perspective, let's just say just one person that you have to contact. Is there a benefit that you've seen in that regard? So in terms of, okay, have you been instead of having to deal with 3 different vendors, 3 different troubleshooting teams, 3 different procurement teams, has it been a little simpler in that sense? Has it saved you time? Would you agree? Would you think so?
Yes, of course. It makes things easier. Because I mentioned already that our IT department is very small, and we don't need to introduce people for this specific case. Call this support line, and for the next topic, call the other support line. And in the end, all things stick together a little bit if it comes to the internet line, or if you think on performance, and if you want to find out bottlenecks, for example, it's easier to have one single point of contact and one person to speak with, or one team to speak with. For me, this makes absolutely sense.
Okay, this is pretty awesome. Thank you. So, and as you've begun to expand into this, there is this talk in the market about SASE, about Secure Access Service Edge. It was a term that was coined by one of the analysts, and that's pretty much what you're doing. So what you're doing is you're converging networking and security, right? With that single vendor approach, which gives you the logistical benefits that you just mentioned. So you mentioned that, okay, I just need to contact one person and everything gets done. So that SASE architecture, Christian Schwendemann, could you just give us a really quick elevator pitch as to what is Secure Access Service Edge? You're intimately familiar with it, I'm sure. So yes. Just a quick.
So I think the one sentence answer before I elaborate a little more is, the world has changed, the needs have changed, the need for security has changed, and SASE as a definition of what is in there is the answer to this. So I already said today once, connecting from A to B is no longer just enough. We need to have the insight of what's going on and to regulate this. And there are different techniques. If it's named Secure Web Gateway, Cloud Access Security Broker, that's just the details of how it functions. But the concept idea itself is to deliver security in a new way, which is, where do my applications and data reside and how do I access them? And most of them these days live in any public cloud data center or software as a service, but at the same time, they also are still part of my network. So modern solutions like Zero Trust Network Access and accessing applications that are hosted inside my own data center, my own premises data center. This is what Citrix can deliver with the whole solution set. And there are different needs customers have, and there are different solutions to these needs. So customers can pick whatever they need for their part of solution. So if it's secure access to web and intranet applications, then it could be remote browser isolation. It could be Citrix Secure Workspace Access. While if we still need the full access to desktops and applications, we have solutions, as now we also have heard, access to the internet, thanks to Citrix Secure Internet Access.
Thank you. That helped a lot. That helped a lot. So yeah, essentially, I think what you're saying is that it's a convergence of different technologies that are happening in order to deliver and suit the requirements of modern day IT teams. So you're not dealing with 20-year-old problems. You're dealing with problems of today, of connecting hybrid workers to SaaS apps, and SASE is an architecture that converges multiple technologies with different names, different acronyms, but brings all those technologies together. So I thank you for that. There is a really quick question that's come, and either of you can jump in. Would love your perspective. The question is, with this solution, do I need an internet proxy solution? So with Citrix Secure Internet Access, do I need an internet proxy solution? So Christian Schwendemann, why don't you go first? And Christian Catterl, if you've got any thoughts in terms of how you would think about this, your thoughts as well.
Yes. So the Citrix Secure Internet Access solution has, as we said, the agent-based approach, which we prefer, but it is in fact then proxying the connection. So you can also use the proxy pack, which is then basically the proxy configuration for your browser. And this is then your internet-based proxy, if you want to name it like this, but with way more options in matters of filtering, insights, reporting, and also conditional access to different resources, as we can assign based on the user, based on the location, based on the IP, based on the computer name, based on many things. What should this user or device be allowed to access?
That's helpful. Thank you. Christian Catterl, anything to add over there? In terms of if you had a proxy earlier, did this satisfy any proxy requirements in your architecture? Anything to add there, or are you good?
Well, basically, we did not have a proxy before, but the proxy usually is available inside the company network only. And using Sia, I can use the proxy, if you call it proxy, even outside of the network, simply everywhere.
Yes.
Policies can be made even time-based. If your workers are allowed, for example, to use the computer at home for private purposes, you may allow them to use sites or services which are not allowed inside or during the work time, but maybe outside of the work time.
And I think there's also
very flexible.
Oh, sorry, my webcam just crashed. So sorry, there is also something I thought that would be notable to add, because one of the slides, at least for me, did not show up with the locations earlier. So this service is also delivered where you need it at. So we have US-based, Europe-based, and Asia-based zones for ASAMA. So depending on where the user is residing, or from a GDPR compliance in Europe, which gateway should he use automatically? So you can decide as a company, where should the nodes be deployed, this proxy node, and where should the traffic route to?
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and Christian Catterl, I love that every time you give this example of exactly what, like, the kind of policy you implemented, the granularity. Okay, there's time-based, and it's just amazing that this is a cloud delivered solution. There's absolutely no hardware to manage. It's all software, yet there is so much granularity in the control. That's pretty awesome. There's another follow-up question. Can you scan other traffic? So can you scan, say, email traffic that's going through? My guess is, can you scan, say, requests for YouTube videos? Can you scan stuff going into, say, a storage account like Dropbox? And
I guess I'm going to take over this question. So this is also one of the reasons why we have an agent. So traditional proxy solution would just look at the default network, which is common for internet access. While our agent, you can define which TCP ports you want to tunnel through our solution. So if it's a non-standard port, or if it's a specific application, or let's say other connection type you want to have granularity and control and insight. And in our advanced solution, we also offer here is security. So are there any malicious applications or things going on? And then, yes, we can also have look at other traffic.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey, I'm going to go a little rogue and I'm going to show a slide. Given the questions that have come, I'm going to show a slide that people that is going to give an introduction about Citrix Sia, because I think it's going to help the audience understand exactly the solution. So essentially, folks, Citrix Sia is this. It's a cloud delivered security solution that contains a secure web gateway, it contains a firewall, it contains a CASB, malware protection, DLP, and sandbox. So it's going to look at all the traffic that's coming through. It's going to scan that traffic, whether it's SSL or not, whether it's coming from a remote user or it's coming from a branch-based user. It's going to scan all that traffic. It's going to check whether there is any known malware signatures in there, or if it's a suspicious file or a suspicious URL, you can send it to a sandbox. It'll analyze the file. And if there's malicious behavior identified, it'll flag it. Let's just say there is atypical behavior. If typically you have X amount of traffic going out from a certain network section, and if that traffic increases by 25%, or if that traffic suddenly increases by 50% and you did not expect it, that's atypical behavior. You can flag that atypical behavior. So you'll scan the traffic, you'll block the threats, you'll identify the analytics, you can report on the analytics, and then you'll send it along to the SaaS or web. All of this is done in line, so you're not backhauling the traffic. So again, I didn't want this to be a sales pitch or anything of that nature, but that's just a really quick overview of what Citrix Secure Internet Access does. Christian, yes, please jump in.
You mentioned before that inspecting SSL traffic, and for example, if I would hear inspecting SSL traffic, I would always think about that I have to deploy the root certificate to all my devices. And for example, how should I deploy the certificate to printers or maybe a television device? This is not needed if you're using Sia. This is another advantage for me.
That's a huge thing, because like you mentioned, you've got a small IT teams. There have been breaches that have been reported in the past where when certificates were not updated in time, or when they were not deployed and implemented properly, breaches were caused because of those wrong implementations, because of those misconfigurations. So these small things, these small automations actually go a long way. I'm so glad you mentioned that, Christian Cattle. Thank you so much. Folks, we are coming up in time. We have 9 minutes remaining. I want to be cognizant of everybody's time, especially Mr. Cattle and Christian Schwennemann. You guys have been awesome. Thank you for helping us today. I'm going to show a couple of closing slides for the webinar. If the audience has any more questions, please shoot them in the chat. Otherwise, like the conversation we had today, if you do have specific questions about your specific implementation, it may not be about Citrix products. If you just want advice on how security should be implemented, reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to advise you on that. And we have awesome guidance from real world customers such as Christian Cattle, who tell us what's relevant, what's not relevant for our customers. So thank you, Christian Cattle, again, and Christian Schwennemann. You were invaluable. Really quickly, I'm going to share some closing slides, if that's okay. And essentially, what folks, thank you for joining us today. As I mentioned earlier, this was a second in a 3-part series. We have another webinar that Valerie is going to be conducting tomorrow with a Citrix partner called Zentegra. As I mentioned, Valerie's awesome, and she's going to be talking about how you can ensure virtual app and desktop performance by modernizing the underlying connectivity. If you have not already looked at yesterday's webinar, if you've just looked at today's, I would recommend that you look at tomorrow's. It'll give you a pretty holistic view into how you have to modernize your networking and security to ensure awesome security and performance for your CVAD and non-CVAD users. If you've not already filled out the survey, please do. You can win some cool freebies. As always, continue to stay in touch with Citrix. We want to talk to you. We want to be an advisor in your IT roadmap, and we're always here to help. Folks, thank you so much. Unless there's something else, I'm really grateful that Christian Catterl and Christian Schwenman, you could join us. I'm really grateful for the audience to spend some time with us today morning. Okay, thank you, everyone. Closing now.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.